CBS. This is a CBS News special report. I'm Margaret Brennan in Washington. We have breaking news out of the Middle East. President Trump is about to address the nation.
Roughly 2 hours ago, he announced via social media that the United States has bombed 3 nuclear sites in Iran. CBS is reporting 6 B-2 stealth fighters dropped 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs on at least one of those sites. It's actually the very first time that weapon has been used in combat. Today, it was to destroy an underground nuclear facility about 60 miles southeast of Tehran. The president said that all American planes are safely now out of Iranian airspace. These American strikes are in support of a war that Israel launched on Iran 9 days ago. We know tonight that the Israeli Prime Minister has spoken to the president, thanked him and congratulated him on the strikes. We are awaiting word now from the President of the United States himself, who is expected to address the nation from the White House as we await him taking the podium.
I want to go to our White House correspondent, Weijia Jiang. Weijia, we know that the president returned to the White House in the 5 o'clock hour, around 6 p.m. He had a national security briefing. What do we know about what was going on at that period of time?
Margaret, that's a really good question. At that time, President Trump had just come back to the White House after spending part of the day at his Bedminster Golf Club. He immediately received a national security briefing, but details about the discussions or decisions made during that period were not immediately released. Margaret, that's right. He was in his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey, but came back this evening, which was actually always the plan, even when he took off for that trip. And right beforehand, he said that Iran had at maximum 2 weeks to try to reach a diplomatic deal. There was no indication at that time that he was going to follow through with the strikes. But of course, that quickly changed.
We see the president now.
The United States military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before, and we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran, far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There is no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago tomorrow. General Kane, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon, and I want to just thank everybody. And in particular, God, I want to just say we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East. God bless Israel, and God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's so I also want to.
So, the President of the United States walked away from the podium where he had been flanked by the Secretary of State and Security Advisor, Marco Rubio, along with the Secretary of Defense and his Vice President, announcing and, well, congratulating the military on what he called spectacular military success in these strikes that were carried out inside Iran earlier today. He said the sites were, quote, completely obliterated. Now, he did seem in those remarks not to completely close the door on further military action. He thanked the United States military and said that he hopes that their services won't be needed again. And he said all of this was meant to erase the nuclear threat posed by Iran. To be clear, United States intelligence assessment has been that Iran was not yet building a nuclear weapon, but that they had been enriching nuclear fuel at worrisome levels. The international community had a high degree of outcry on that point. Just a few weeks ago in Vienna, you had the Israeli strikes come the following day. After that, in the midst of what had been a diplomatic effort by President Trump and his envoy Steve Witkoff to negotiate with Iran to get them to limit their nuclear program, those did not result in an agreement, though up until today, I am told the United States was trying to reach out. Yet just a few hours ago we saw these strikes carried out. I want to go over to the Pentagon now, where our Charlie D'Agata is, and apparently, Charlie, you'll be there early tomorrow since the president just said there will be an 8 a.m. Pentagon press conference where he will detail these strikes. The Secretary of Defense will... What do we know at this hour? I know Iran is acknowledging and saying that these strikes happened, but that it will not end their nuclear program.
Yeah. Well, Margaret, we await that briefing tomorrow. We have had very few briefings here at the Pentagon, so it will be interesting to see how much detail is shared there. But as it was already shared, 6 bunker busters on Fordow, that would have meant at least 3 of the B-2 bombers that we've already discussed where they came from when they were deployed. We were talking earlier today about whether they went from Whiteman, whether they were going to Guam, maybe it was a head fake, maybe it was a head shake of where this was going to go and where it was going to happen. Something like 30 Tomahawk missiles at 2 other sites there. They've been called massive precision strikes. I think what we need to know, and I'm not sure whether that is knowable at this point, is how damaging that was. If the White House is to be believed, whether it crippled, entirely took out Iran's nuclear capabilities at Fordow, Natanz, and Safran, he's calling it a spectacular success. But the other thing we need to be concerned about now is, he mentioned when he took out the assassination of Qasem Soleimani when he was president, and we saw the retaliation then across multiple American targets. There are 40,000 U.S. service members spread throughout the Middle East, and they have come under attack before. And we've already known, even leading up to this, because it was always a what if. But leading up to where we are now, we've been speaking to people here at the Pentagon, DoD, saying if there is an Iranian retaliation, how are we postured? How is the United States postured to defend against that? There are multiple, in fact, I can't remember how many times or how the last time we've seen this many military assets flooded into that area in order to defend against a possible Iranian retaliation to protect U.S. forces there.
No doubt that force posture has been really built up in these past few days. At the same time, it was just this morning that we heard the U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, announce with detail for the very first time how Americans in Israel could actually safely get out. The U.S. government brought about 70 of them by plane to Greece, evacuating them from the area. The airspace over Israel has been closed for days, So it has made it hard for people to leave if they wanted to because there has been this back and forth with Iran's retaliation against Israel. Some of those missiles piercing their defenses, those US-provided defenses, and in many ways, and I know it has been remarkable. Charlie, whether we're talking to current or former officials, they all seem to say it's, well, amazing. We haven't yet seen retaliation. We haven't yet seen a strike against a United States base or United States assets. Now that the United States has entered this conflict in this way, that may change. And honestly, I have no doubt that there is a bracing for what could be coming next. I spoke to some diplomats in the region just within the past hour, and I was told there wasn't much of a heads up given to some of our allies. There, if just to remind people, Charlie spoke about 40,000 United States military personnel in that region of the world. The fourth largest military installation America has in the world is in Kuwait, which is very close there to Iran, and there are very significant naval assets in Bahrain. A lot of American families are stationed there. So it's not just Israel, it is the surrounding Arab countries that the United States is allied with who are, holding their breath tonight, wondering if hosting those American forces also makes them a target. So, we're going to be watching all those bases that you see there as well as some of the other American assets in the region. I also just want to acknowledge here that while the president has been saying this was a successful strike, we don't yet know what the end game is here. We don't know that from the United States, and honestly, we don't know that from the nation of Israel either. The goal was stated to be destruction of Iran's nuclear program. Tonight, you have out of Iran statements from their atomic agency saying that this national industry, as they refer to it, will not be stopped, that you just can't kill knowledge. There have been, of course, assassinations of nuclear scientists. As we know, we want to go now on the phone. We are joined by General Frank McKenzie, who was the commanding combatant commander there in the Middle East for so many years. General McKenzie, I hope you can hear me now. I know you have literally gamed out this scenario for years when you were in the job. What are those U.S. military families? What are those soldiers and naval men? What are they bracing for tonight? What should we expect with the light of day?
Good to be with you tonight. I've worked on this plan for 15 years. It looks like a successful strike, as you noted. We'll know more in the hours and days ahead, how successful it actually was. But what the Central Command commander right now is most concerned about is the possible Iranian response. What's it going to be? What are they going to do? And a lot of the thinking over the last few days, I'm sure in the Department of Defense, has been how to prepare for that inevitable Iranian response, and so we've flowed forces in, we'll be ready for it. What we want to do is avoid a significant loss of American life that would then push us up the escalatory ladder. So we want to save the Iranians from themselves. We want to maintain balance in the region if we can, and that's what the CENTCOM commander is going to be working on right now. I would also note that Iran is gravely weakened as a result of their exchanges with Israel over the past few weeks, and in fact over the last year or so. So this is a very significant thing to bear in mind as we look at what the Iranians might do in response. The final thing I will say is this. The Iranians have held all the lower cards on the escalation ladder. But the simple fact is this. We hold all the cards on the escalation ladder, as does Israel, and the Iranians know that.
Well, General, to that point, I was speaking to an Iran analyst just a day ago who described this regime as homicidal but not suicidal, meaning they would restrain themselves from a head-to-head conflict with the United States. We're rapidly approaching that point right now, and I think this measurably moves us forward to that end. We have learned here at CBS that there was some advance notice that was on pass to Iran about these strikes. But as I said, there wasn't full diplomatic notice being given to all of the allies in the region. You ran that operation in 2020 when, as you mentioned, Qasem Soleimani was taken off the battlefield. How much visibility does the United States have for what comes next? How good is our intelligence in terms of the threat picture? So, Margaret, our intelligence is very good. Penetration of Iran by human sources and other sources is very good. We're going to have a good feel for what the Iranians are thinking. The other factor that's out there is much Iranian leadership is dead now. And the Iranians have because of their corrupt system of promoting officers and keeping them in place. They don't have a good succession plan inside their military, so people go into a job and they stay 10, 12, 15 years while they're growing rich from that job. So those people are now dead, but they haven't groomed a successor. So that makes it very hard for the supreme leader to formulate decisions and to transmit those decisions to the Iranian military. And that will further complicate Iranian responses, I believe, in the days and weeks ahead. Thank you, General. And just to clarify for our audience, as we were talking about the killing of top Iranian officials, many of them have been military leaders. We were showing you a picture there of the supreme leader Qasem. We were talking about Qasem Soleimani. We were talking about the supreme leader just now, showing you a picture of him. We do not know his whereabouts at this hour. He has actually not been seen in public for a few days now. He had this video address that we are showing you, but he is at 86 years old dealing with cancer. And all of our reporting is that he has been very hard to contact. In other words, the top levels of Iranian government aren't sure where their boss is at this hour. We do not know his whereabouts when we're talking about succession planning. That is the man that is the main decision maker from which all things flow. And so, this question of what comes next is going to be really important to think about as we look at who else may be able to give orders or not give orders. We want to speak to Samantha Vinograd, who I'm told is joining us as well. Right now, she's a national security contributor to CBS. She also joins us on the phone. She's a former assistant secretary for counterterrorism at Homeland Security. And Sam, I know you served before that on the National Security Council as well. There has been so much reporting around the threat in the United States over the past few years. The risk to officials involved with actions against Iran, the risk of sleeper cells here in the United States. When we talk about retaliation, should we be thinking about the homeland? Margaret, I am deeply concerned about the potential for retaliatory attacks here in the homeland by Iran. Iran's nuclear program has certainly taken a hit. We will await the battleground assessment to understand how deep that hit was. But we do know that Iran is likely going to rely on its asymmetric advantage in this conflict with the United States and Israel, which is its proxies all around the world. Iran has for decades had both the intent and the ability to direct and inspire individuals to attack American, Israeli, and Jewish interests and assets all around the world. During my time at Homeland Security, we tracked myriad Iranian threats here in the homeland. As you mentioned, against former government officials involved in the strike against Soleimani, against dissidents, against journalists, against the Saudi ambassador during the Obama administration, and against everyday Americans. So right now, while Iran has certainly taken a hit to its nuclear program and military installations, it is likely that they will rely on their asymmetric advantage in this context, which is their proxies, to try to send a signal to the United States and to the rest of the world that they just aren't going to take this hit without any kind of response. Now, how significant their reprisals will be is something the intelligence and law enforcement communities are likely looking into, but I am concerned about the threat here in the homeland. Yeah, I'm looking at an email now from our Homeland Security correspondent, Nicole Skanga, detailing some of the law enforcement officials throughout the country who say they have not yet been given any kind of briefing in regard to possible downstream effects. But as you point out, that doesn't mean there isn't one. In fact, I was speaking to a U.S. official earlier today who said that this administration has shown a higher risk tolerance when it comes to things like this than past administrations. That was in reference to the security of Americans abroad. As we noted there, Sam, it was just earlier today that the United States ambassador to Israel announced the details of how to leave Israel right now with United States government chartered flights. Is that a little late in the game? If you have an American family member in the region right now, how worried should you be? Well, Margaret, on your first point, law enforcement intelligence professionals were already on heightened alert as it pertains to the Iranian threat just based upon the strikes against Qasem Soleimani and just various Iranian threat streams that were around, even when I was at DHS ending in 2023. So, while they should get a briefing on downstream effects, they are already very aware of Iranian capabilities in this context, and likely monitoring social media, encrypted platforms and other sources to see if they can find any leads on specific threat streams following these military strikes. Now, I will tell you that we have had operational plans to evacuate Americans from the region for years, and certainly post-October 7th, those operational plans were ready to go, and I was very surprised that they were not implemented sooner. Based upon Israel's strikes against Iran and what we knew to be potential strikes against Americans in the region. As soon as President Trump took the decision to launch these strikes, I would have expected him and his National Security Council to immediately begin to actively evacuate Americans, not just from Israel, but potentially from Lebanon, from Egypt, from Iraq. Iran is obviously more complicated. Just knowing that Iran will be looking for opportunities to harm Americans, whether that's through violence, through kidnapping, through harassment, and otherwise. So it wasn't a question of the operational plans not being ready, it was a question of the State Department deciding to implement those plans, the Department of Defense helping to operate them. And I think that it is unfortunately too little too late, based upon the cauldron that is the Middle East right now. Right? Well, those are some cautionary words at this hour, Sam. We know that Americans were ordered out of U.S. mission Iraq a few days ago, but when it came to some of those other posts, there are still plenty of Americans working, living, and many of them with families as well. We're going to continue to track what's happening there in the region. And I want to go now to the White House where we find White House correspondent Weijia Jiang. Weijia, I know from the rundown here we saw the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, a number of key advisors including the CIA director. And there has been a very public back and forth that the president has had disputing publicly the findings of the intelligence community when it came to assessing whether or not Iran was actually making a weapon, or whether it was that U.S. intelligence community said wanting to be a threshold state. In other words, give themselves the option to get a weapon, but not actually building one. All of it comes back to that question of why this military action last Thursday, and why this action now. And Margaret, we've been really trying to drill down on that very question during this past week because President Trump gave a very specific timeline. He said that Iran was just weeks away from having a nuclear weapon. And so I asked during the last White House press briefing, Caroline Leavitt, what he meant by that. Did he mean that Iran was getting close to having enough enriched uranium, which is required to build that weapon, to start making a bomb? Or is Iran just weeks away from actually finishing the production of a weapon? And she said that, it would only take 2 weeks if the Supreme Leader gave the green light for Iran to have that weapon. And as you pointed out, that contradicts what we have heard from the IAEA, which of course monitors all the nuclear sites around the world, and which recently said that Iran was not actively pursuing a nuclear bomb. And also flies in the face of what the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, testified. Now, she did talk about those high levels of enriched uranium. That is very different from saying they actually are close to a bomb. But that is what the president said. That is what this administration said. And so we will be asking for more details because that is so important to answer the why of why now. Yes, and important question. Many lawmakers will be raising as well. We know that lawmakers have not been briefed. They are scheduled to be briefed in the House and Senate on Tuesday by the Director of National Intelligence, along with military leaders, on exactly how all of this came about and the justification for it. We know as of this evening that the top leadership in Congress hasn't fully been briefed, or at least the Democrats who are in that so-called Gang of Eight, those who lead the parties in both houses, and then also have oversight of the intelligence committees. The Republicans have told CBS that they have been briefed. The Democrats have not. That further, of course, will raise questions about any kind of politics here on such a significant issue of national security. This tonight, no doubt, has been the most significant national security and foreign policy decision the President of the United States has made in this second Trump term. We will be tracking all of what comes next very closely, and we will be bringing it to you here on CBS. Our coverage will continue on CBS News 24/7, your local news on this CBS station, and of course, first thing tomorrow on CBS Sunday Morning, and with me on Face the Nation. This has been a CBS News Special Report. I'm Margaret Brennan in Washington.